Hi, I'm Jason Wachob, founder and CEO of MindBodyGreen, the best-selling author of Wealth, and your host for the MindBodyGreen podcast, where I'll be bringing you deep and insightful dialogues with some of the greatest minds in wellness. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star review, comment, and share with your friends and family. And don't forget to visit us at mindbodygreen.com for your daily dose of wellness. Thanks and enjoy the podcast. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to take a minute to talk supplements. As you guys probably know, these days there are so many supplements on the market offering different benefits, but fish oil is one of the ones you'll hear about the most, and for good reason. Pretty much everyone, regardless of age or activity level, can benefit from taking a fish oil supplement daily. That's because 75% of Americans don't get enough omega-3s, the main component of fish oil, in their diets. Omax3 is one of the cleanest fish oil brands on the market, and now they're offering MBG listeners a free box at tryomax.com/mindbodygreen. Omega-3s can do everything from improve mental performance and boost mood to protect against coronary heart disease and promote better athletic performance. But you want to make sure you're getting it in its purest form. You need to be really selective when it comes to choosing a fish oil supplement because rancid oils full of fillers can actually do more harm than good. Omax3 is obsessive about sourcing and production, and their product is 93.9% pure omega-3s. To put that number into perspective, they encourage consumers to try what they call the freezer test challenge. Basically, if you freeze any other omega-3 supplement, it will get cloudy because of all the filler. But an Omax3 soft gel remains clear. It's that pure. We've partnered with Omax to give you guys an insane deal. You'll get a box for free when you head over to tryomax.com/mindbodygreen. That's tryomax.com/mindbodygreen. Omax3 comes with a 60-day money-back guarantee, so you have plenty of time to try it and really feel the Omax difference for yourself. My wife Colleen and I prioritize eating healthy, but between running our own business and spending time with our daughter Ellie, we don't always have time to go grocery shopping and cook all the delicious plant-based meals we want to eat, which is why I'm so glad that Hungry Root is sponsoring today's podcast episode. Founded in 2015, Hungry Root delivers healthy convenience to your door, making it easy to eat healthy when you're super busy. Meals only take 10 minutes to prepare, and each one includes fresh-cut vegetables, mouth-watering sauces, and there's so much variety. They have 75 different dishes, so we definitely never get bored. Even better, all of their meals are low in sodium and preservatives and sugar-free. The only issue? We're guilty of hitting their almond chickpea cookie dough just a little too hard. Hey, what do you expect? It's delicious. Sound good to you? Use code MBG to get $25 off your first 2 deliveries for a total savings of $50. Hey everybody, I just want to take a quick moment to thank you all for listening to the podcast and to say that we want to listen to you. So if you have any questions, any dream guests, we are all ears and would love to hear from you. So ask me anything and stay tuned for the answers or your dream guests on this very podcast. Send your questions to podcast@mindbodygreen.com. That's podcast@mindbodygreen.com. And I look forward to hearing from all of you. Thanks so much, and let's go back to the podcast. Donna James received her Master's of Science in Medical Nutrition from Columbia University. She is a board-certified nutritionist, functional medicine practitioner, and cognitive behavioral therapist. She specializes in weight loss, women's hormonal health, mood, stigmatizing shame from childhood experiences. She is a trusted expert here at MindBodyGreen as she's a member of the MBG Collective and a longtime friend. And most recently, she's written an amazing new book, The Archetype Diet. Welcome, Donna.
Hi, Jason. So happy to be here.
So, what is the Archetype Diet? I'm very intrigued.
Well, so a little bit about me. I'm a nutritionist and functional medicine practitioner, and I'm also a cognitive behavioral therapist. So I've got those 3 modalities coming into the Archetype Diet. So I've been in practice for over 12 years. I work principally with women. I've actually worked one-to-one with over 3,000 women. So it's a collaboration of my observations as well as the success that I've seen with my clients and their struggles. So what I noticed, and I'm really lucky being based here in New York, is that I have a really educated demographic of women. They know what it is that they need to eat. And so I noticed that even when they knew exactly what it was that they needed to eat, they weren't necessarily seeing the results that they were looking for. Whether something else in the body was off, like the gut microbiome, or there was inflammation, or there was just unresolved traumas. And so the archetype diet, which is a diet piece of it, is about, well, how do you achieve sustainable weight loss in the long term and change those behaviors? How do you change the thoughts that precede the behaviors? So the archetype diet is based on 4 archetypes of women.
So you kept, in this process, you're like, I just keep on seeing this over and over, and it's these
continually, but it was actually like an evolution. So I would see certain things, and then I started to notice the patterns. And when I realized that a woman's behaviors in particular were where she sourced her self-worth from, that's when it was the light bulb moment. So what happens is that with most diet books, we're looking at changing the food.
Right.
And then maybe it's changing the behaviors. But there's a step before that, which is, well, why do you engage in those behaviors in the first place? And unless you look at the why, then you're going to constantly be repeating the same patterns. So when women come in, it's like, well, I need to change my behavior here. Like I keep picking at food, or I keep eating from my children's plates. And they know that they shouldn't be doing that because that's not going to achieve the goal of the sustainable weight loss, but they just can't seem to change it. And so I noticed that it really came down to, where do you source your self-worth from? Because your sense of self-worth is your greatest reward. And so that's always going to take you off the pathway of something else that becomes lesser if it's done in the unconscious. So the 4 archetypes of women are the nurturer, and the nurturer sources her self-worth from being there for others. Like really just making sure that everybody there is happy. It's like she's like the mother hen that's sort of people pleasing in some way, like holding the space for everybody. Then there's the Wonder Woman. And so the Wonder Woman, her sense of self-worth is based on success and achievement. And so that's my archetype. So a lot of the archetypes in New York are nurturers and Wonder Woman. Then the third is the femme fatale. The femme fatale bases her sense of self-worth on her appearance and looks. The ethereal, it bases her sense of self-worth on being different and being sort of fluid and floaty and a little bit intuitive. And all of these sense of self-worth have these wonderful positive patterns. There's also the shadow side to it. So the positive aspect of being the nurturer is she is so loving and kind and giving and compassionate. Like I surround myself with nurturers. Right. They're the ones that you can friends that you can always rely on. The downside is the people-pleasing aspect. Always jumping in, feeling like you need to be there for people, taking on more responsibility than what you need to.
Put others in front of themselves.
Always. And so then what happens then if that's what your belief is? You get exhausted, adrenals get tapped out, thyroid issues, estrogen issues because of the way that insulin works with the estrogen. And so you create these hormonal imbalances, which actually creates these body types. So the nurturer, I know the nurturer when she walks into my office. I know the nurturer walking down the street because I can look at her body type. And so the body type of the nurturer is she's insulin dominant, so she'll tend to carry body fat everywhere. And she can also be a little estrogen dominant. And so that's where there's storage of body fat on the upper thighs. So there needs to be a diet for that type of woman that regulates the insulin levels and regulates the estrogen levels.
Got it.
But that's not the only piece. Right? You have to go back to why she created that imprint, that her sense of self-worth was based on her ability to be there for others. Because otherwise she will continually put people before her. And so that's what the archetype gets into. Why did that happen? So it gets into childhood traumas and the process for actually changing it. I'll come back to that.
And what about that? We'll move on. If we go one by one. So that's the nurturer. We'll move on to the Wonder Woman.
So the Wonder Woman, sense of self-worth is coming from success and achievement. And so her dominant hormone is cortisol. So that's a stress hormone, and most of us know that we store body fat on the abdominal area when cortisol is elevated. Mm-hmm. And then when cortisol is low, because you've been in these stressful situations for a long period of time, it makes the belly fat very resistant to being able to lose. So for that type of Wonder Woman, she's really got to manage her stress levels. And from a food perspective, having foods that she's sensitive to exacerbate the effect of cortisol. So taking out gluten and dairy is particularly important for the Wonder Woman.
You're not a fan of those two things, regardless.
Not in this country. So
Sure.
Just because of the way that they've been modified.
We'll come back to that.
Yes. And so the Wonder Woman has created this childhood belief that she is worthy of attention if she is successful. And that type of woman tends to reward eat. Eats really well during the day, and then at the end of the night needs to have that little piece of dark chocolate and really is resistant to giving it up, or is the one that's going to treat herself to a 10-course degustation menu. She's the reward eater. And it's going back to her and understanding why she needs to feel rewarded for the day, or it's picking at food while she's answering the last hour of emails before she goes to bed.
Is reward better than punishment, though? Like there's some people, like, you just use the language. Some people will say, like, it's reward versus I'm cheating.
Not too many people actually engage in punishment, but that would be the femme fatale trait.
Got it. Okay.
So the reward eating, it's also a switch. Yes. It's the ability to turn off. But if that type of eating is not what you want to engage in because it's stopping you from getting to your ultimate goal of being at your desired weight,
sure,
you want to change it. So I'm not the person that says, yes, please go and eat a little piece of dark chocolate every night. I want to get into, well, why do you feel the need to? Like, what's going on in your life that makes you feel like you need to be rewarded for that? Because there's some underlying issues there with the life, just often through perception, that just need to be altered.
Sure.
So then you have the femme fatale. So if your worth is based on your body, that's really challenging. So you're constantly off and on a diet. You're the way that you measure yourself when you walk into a room is how pretty you are compared to everybody else in the room. If you're prettier than somebody else in the room, then that's going to be a great night. If you're not prettier than other people in the room, it's going to be a terrible night. So this is the woman that is more likely to be subject to eating disorders, is the obsession with food. 80% of the time you're thinking about food, like whether you should be eating the food or not eating the food, and then you punish yourself for it, and then you feel ashamed. As soon as you feel ashamed, then you get stuck in this horrible cycle, and it can go on and on and on. It can go on for an hour, or it can go on for weeks.
Right.
And then, so with that, we've got to break, well, how did you develop the belief that your worth is based on what you look like? And Instagram models are a classic example of that. Like, that's the femme fatale.
Instagram in general is not helping. Well, it's not. It's a problem.
That's right. But the imprint of I'm worthy because of what I look like developed early.
Right.
So not every woman has that. So my archetype is the Wonder Woman. I want to look good, but my value isn't based on that. So with the femme fatale, the body type can be any, depending on whether she's eating a little bit more like a nurturer, where she'll just be quite the voluptuous femme fatale, or she's really restricting her food and she looks a little bit more like the ethereal. Mm-hmm. Either way, you have to get into the core of how did you develop that belief. And it's most often, and actually I've never seen that belief happen on adoration of her looks as a child. It's normally the opposite, the lack of it.
Wow. So you went really deep on this.
Yes. Like I really wanted to change the conversation around weight loss, because there's so much shame attached to it. Like, weight loss, oh no, let's just accept our body for the way it is. It's like, hell no, right? If you don't like the way your body is, there are things you can do to change it.
Right.
There truly is. There's a formula for a way of eating for your hormones that will get you those results. Right. But then you need to change the mindset. And that's what I wanted to introduce with this book. You got to go back to childhood.
So let's go to the ethereal. Yeah.
So,
and then I want to ask, was there like a fifth that was like...
yes, there was actually.
A fifth.
So the ethereal is, she feels really light and airy.
Sure.
And sort of, as a child, was really perceived to be the weird girl. Right? And so she is very, very intuitive, but also the one that retreated into her own space, very sensitive. So she would describe herself as being empathic and highly sensitive to the world.
So is this West LA inspired for you?
Well, yeah, so you can see the difference. So in New York, you got a lot of Wonder Woman and you got a lot of nurturers,
Yep.
and actually in LA it is skewed a little bit more towards the ethereals,
Yep.
and that the women tells you obviously other Wonder Woman nurturers there too. But yes, it's quite funny how the different locations will actually pull that type of archetype in, because I live between two cities, and between those two cities, and so it's really obvious to me, like the social currency.
Right.
In New York, you are valued for your intellect.
Sure.
Like less so. It's
Yep.
much more about that creative side, and a little bit depending on where you associate on the looks. Mm-hmm. So the ethereal has it's like the skinny little vegan girl, like the one that's like 95 to 100 pounds, and a lot of the other archetypes would like to be like. And for her, she may not have weight issues, but she has other issues. So she tends to be low in estrogen. So there's depression and there's infertility. There's definitely gut microbiome issues. And for her, when she gains weight, because the Archetype Diet is a weight loss book, it's because she's so sensitive that she's using these carbohydrates to numb her sensitivity.
Right.
And she can't really identify like what's her emotion or what's somebody else's emotion. And so again, like all the archetypes, it's like going back to the childhood patterns as to how did you create that imprint that your worthiness was based on your ability to be intuitive and to be empathic and to be different.
So you really think everything goes back to childhood?
Yes.
And what if someone's listening and saying like, I'm maybe a blend of these, like I feel fine, I'm good, I'm okay, I have chocolate when I want chocolate, I feel pretty good, I'm not maybe I'm the size I want to be for the most part, I feel good, like
I think that's great. I think if that's where you are in life, that's fantastic. To look beyond though, because very few of us have that, unless we've done work, have that really wonderful, incredible life where everything just flows.
No
for
one
us.
does, right? Sure.
And so
It's a journey.
And so it may not show up for you in the physical body, and so therefore there's no symptoms. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's not showing up for you in your relationships.
Right.
And so therefore you'd go back to that. So this is all about self-awareness. Like how you interact with people, because I can use the archetypes to talk about dating. So one of my my next door neighbor in LA, when the woman would come to the door, I just thought they were femme fatale. So there they were on the west side where everything's like flip-flops and no makeup, and there's like really high heels and a lot of makeup and often fake boobs. And we go for a walk one time, and he's like, oh my goodness, I'm so sick of these girls that I date, and they're just jealous. And I like laugh at him, and I said, what do you expect? I said, you're dating the femme fatale archetype, and in the negative, she's extremely jealous. Of course she's going to keep asking you about your ex-wife. Like, if you don't want that in your relationship, look for another archetype.
So I have two questions. So one is, what was the fifth archetype that was, like, it's on the cusp of maybe it didn't make the cut of this book?
So the fifth archetype was the muse, and the muse was when you were completely balanced and you had all four of those archetypes weaved within you. And that's actually what the book is about, is as you break the association that your self-worth is based on something external, all of a sudden you don't have these vulnerabilities that you once had, and you now have space to be able to layer in the positive attributes of all the other archetypes so that you can become like at the crown.
Right.
So in the archetype, you're either at the top of the crown, or you're really balanced, or you're not. You're dysfunctional. And so when you're more dysfunctional, the physical body is really out of balance. And when you're at the crown, it's really balanced. So I can look at a room of women and know which ones are out of balance by looking at their body type. Now, if the body's really balanced, then I won't know which archetype they are, because they've
I'm sure
got
you're
that
popular at dinner parties.
I don't turn it on at dinner parties. It's like unless somebody asks me like to what they are,
But
and then I listen to them.
But this doesn't apply to men, though.
It wasn't created for men, but it could be applied to men. So there are men that fall into those 4 archetypes in a very generalized sense. Your men are in the masculine, and that masculine is the Wonder Woman.
Right.
And so I don't know if I'd split that into another category as well. I haven't observed as many men through this lens, but it's something to consider.
Maybe your next book.
That's what people say.
So in your estimation of the people you've seen, like how does it slice percentage wise? Is it even across the board of the 4 archetypes, like 25% each, or do you see?
So I actually can't give you an estimate of that because of where I practice. So I practice in New York and LA.
So you're not seeing.
And so I can't say how that skews. But we could look at it from Wonder Woman developed because of the post-feminist movement. So I was born in the mid-70s, the same time as you, and it was really about be smart. Like you can be like a man,
right.
you can do anything like a man, and so you go down that track. That's what you really believe. Like be educated, be intelligent. Don't worry about your look so much. Like move on from that. But then there's also the piece here is that women are looked at for the way that they look, as are men.
Sure.
And so all of that still exists. I wouldn't say it's 25, 25, 25. I feel like the ethereals are less. My hope is that, and we can see this, is that we are starting to value intuition more.
Sure.
And we'll start to see more of those ethereal women come out, because ethereal women have this wonderful belief that there's just this underlying harmony in the universe and everything should be good and beautiful and wonderful. And so for them, seeing pain and discomfort is really challenging for them and heartbreaking for them. The other archetypes don't necessarily look at the world through that lens.
Right.
So the Wonder Woman archetype is sort of the most selfish out of
right.
all the archetypes, because it's all about me and success. And the femme fatale too can be a little bit like that, but it's really driven through just like deep insecurity.
So I'm assuming between these archetypes, there are some commonalities of things that probably are good for you and not good for you. And I'll start with the things that probably aren't good for you. Sugar. Sugar, well, gluten.
And I actually, in this book, I not only do I give you the archetype, the diet plan, or like the meal plan for each of the archetypes, but I talk through a lot of the myths out there about the food. And so with MINDBODYGREEN, we created this Ditching Sugar program back in 2014. And it's still a fantastic program.
Yep.
And so with sugar, yes, we don't want to be eating a lot of sugar, but should you be completely abstaining from sugar? Do not fall into that camp at all. A little bit of sugar, why do you want to take out some of the joys from life, which might be the occasional macaroon or the occasional piece of cake or gluten-free cake on your birthday?
Or real cake.
Or real cake, right? It's finding peace with it.
Right.
It's finding the balance. It's the issue is when you feel viscerally driven towards the sugar, that it becomes a problem. And one of the areas that bothers me so much in this wellness world with sugar is sugar's addictive. It's like, okay, let's step back a little bit from that. Because the research out there showing that sugar is addictive is actually flawed. So sugar stimulates dopamine. That doesn't mean it's addictive. It just means it's pleasurable.
Right.
So when the research looked at the withdrawal effects, there aren't the withdrawal effects that you get with drugs. And so one of the studies shows that sugar is more addictive than cocaine. Well, actually, they didn't use sugar. They used sucralose.
So they used Splenda.
So they used a sugar substitute, which is 1,000 times sweeter than sugar.
Right.
And that's what it was. It was just reported incorrectly.
I did not know that. So Splendo's more addictive than cocaine.
Yes. And so then it's like, well, why do we feel like we want sugar? So another wonderful piece of research.
But it's still not good. Sugar's still not good.
No. Still, it should be very limited.
An indulgence.
Precisely. And another study that they did with the rats is they took the rats from their one floor cage and they gave them a 3-story cage, and they gave them little rat toys and igloos. And when they did that, they were completely uninterested in the sugar. And that's what I see with my clients. That the reason, give them toys. Have them have some joy in life. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, well, it was, what's her name? Marion Woodman has a great quote, which is like, when you want sugar, you're missing some sweetness in your life.
Right.
So look at it from that psychological perspective. Is that where can you add some more joy and fulfillment into your life? And, I hear it from my clients all the time. Once I have a bite of candy, like, I'm done, right? I need to finish the entire bag. So therefore, sugar is bad. And when we say sugar is bad, we take the responsibility away from ourselves to change that. When we say sugar is addictive, it's like, oh my goodness, can't do anything about it. Like, once I've had a bite of that candy, I'm gone. And it's like, well, let's have a look at it from a different perspective. If something else that stimulates dopamine, sex. Let's say you're in the middle of this most amazing, beautiful, wonderful sexual act and your partner stops halfway through. Are you going to be pissed off? Are you going to want more of it? Right. Yes, hell yes, because it's stimulating dopamine. It's the same thing. So it doesn't mean that sex is bad because you want more of it because it got stopped halfway through. And it's the same with the sugar.
So should we all be seeing therapists instead of nutritionists?
Both. Right. So my original training was as a nutritional therapist for that reason, is that once you get the piece down about what to eat, which is actually pretty simple, it's like, well, why can't you do it?
Right.
And it's not that it's your fault you can't do it. It's like going back to understand, well, something else is getting your priority. What I really wanted to call the book was, it's not willpower, it's your worth. But they decided they didn't want to do that. Because it's like, it really is where you source your self-worth from is giving you a greater reward than actually what you perceive to be willpower.
So we're going to move on from sugar to gluten.
Gluten. So, I've been telling people to come off gluten for the last 12 years. And if you have some type of physical issue, particularly if it's an autoimmune disease, and you haven't gone off gluten, it would warrant you taking gluten out of the diet as a starting point for a month. And if you have a sensitivity, what happens is that when you reintroduce, whether it's wheat or gluten or something else in the gluten-containing foods, you become hypersensitive to it because the antibodies increase.
Sure.
And so when you have that bread roll or that pasta, the body will react to it in a negative way. I've seen hives, which was shocking to me because that typically isn't what a sensitivity is. It's more what an allergy is. Headaches, fatigue, weight gain. When I was sensitive to gluten, as soon as I would eat it, I would gain 5 pounds of water weight, and it would take about 4 days to come off. That's what I can tell with my clients. So if they've had a big weekend and they're like, oh my goodness, I gained 4 pounds. It's like, you didn't gain 4 pounds of body fat. What you did is you gained 4 pounds of water, and part of that is probably inflammatory water. So if they've eaten gluten, I know that they're sensitive to gluten. But it can also be that they converted the more carbohydrate-based foods to glycogen stored in a water base, and should not worry about it. So I find that the inflammatory water from the gluten changes in the scale is the most obvious symptom. Mind you, I'm looking through the lens of weight loss. People are coming to me for weight loss, so I just will give that caveat.
So what about some people say sourdough not as bad?
Yes, and so gluten. The reason that we react to gluten is it's a very large molecule. It's a very large protein molecule. So we only become sensitive to something that's protein based. And because gluten was modified in the late 60s and early 70s to become a larger molecule, that's why it's even more reactive to the body. Now, when you use sourdough, you break down that gluten molecule to a smaller protein molecule, so it's much less reactive. And there was a study that came out maybe 3 or 4 years ago where half of the celiacs in the study could actually tolerate the sourdough, half couldn't.
Right.
So for me, I eat I now eat gluten because I don't have a reaction to it because I was able to reverse it.
So you're better off having the sourdough than like gluten-free
Completely.
bread? Yeah.
Well, depends. So if you have the sensitivity to
You don't,
gluten,
assuming you don't.
yes.
Right.
So I eat organic sourdough because the other piece with the gluten, which is not just gluten, is the glyphosate, which is sprayed on the
Right.
wheat crops. So there is a question mark over, is it gluten or is it the glyphosate that's triggering the leaky gut and potentially these autoimmune diseases? I don't think we really know the answer there, but nonetheless, the solution is to take the gluten out of the diet.
So something else that's very topical these days, lectins.
Yes. And so I haven't read Stephen Grundy's book because I was just
He's not a fan of lectins, but you
Yes.
know, or you got and all lectins are not created equally. You've got corn, you've got beans, and what's your take generally?
So on the
Most
beans,
everyone I know is like corn, not so good. Beans, a lot of people are torn.
yeah. So with corn, the reason why we don't love corn is, again, it's one of the most heavily sprayed
right.
crops with the glyphosate. It's also used in a lot of gluten-free products.
Yep.
So you can take out the wheat, but then you can develop a sensitivity to the corn, and so then you're at a neutral point.
Right.
Fresh corn that grown out in Long Island in the middle of summer, where there's very little, where it's organic, like how is that impacting the body? It's different. It's different to say corn tortilla.
Right.
So I actually allow my clients to have that type of corn. And then with the other type of lectins, I'll say the legumes. When you're not dealing with chronic disease, there shouldn't be a reason for you to take the legumes out of the diet. So the lectins are deactivated when they're soaked and cooked.
Yep. Pressure cooker.
So most people aren't eating a hummus where the chickpeas are not, and if it's raw, they're sprouted. I've never seen that. So it's either sprouted hummus or it's cooked.
Right.
Lentils, no one's eating them raw. And maybe there are some vegans are eating them sprouted. So that sort of deactivates the lectins. And there's a view that maybe it binds up part of the minerals. But it's a plant. And so that can be the way of regulating the nutrient intake. If there's something negative in there, it's probably there for a purpose.
Right.
What
about nuts?
So I'll just finish up on the legumes. So for somebody with like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or if you get bloated after you eat the legumes, it doesn't mean that the legumes are not good for you. It's that your gut microbiome is not replete with good bacteria, because the good bacteria breaks down the fiber in the legumes. So we as humans do not actually have the enzymes to break down the fiber in legumes. So that's my first marker of, okay, we pull the legumes out while we restore the gut microflora. So for me, the legumes are not, to me, the lectins are a non-issue. There's other things that are going on. And it very much depends on what's happening with that person individually. But I like people to be able to have them. So they're such a wonderful source of carbohydrates because they have the added addition of the protein.
Right.
And I was talking, Mark Harmon, you interviewed him on like the pagan diet. And I said, you can do like the paleo diet and then the vegan diet that way, but you can't do a vegan paleo. Like you can't be vegan and then take out your grains and your legumes, because that's your principal source of your amino acids. I've seen it. All that happens is that person ends up incredibly depressed because they don't have enough of their amino acids to create their own neurotransmitters.
So what's the solve for that person?
So that when they talk to me, what's so interesting, most of them are more fearful of putting the legumes and the grains in the diet than they are putting the meat, and so they become pescatarian. Fascinating.
And then they're fine. Eating fish.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's that's again a little bit of the femme fatale mindset too. It's like, oh my goodness, the greens and the legumes are bad. I was like, no, they're not. It's just we got to get the portion sizes right, and you got to know how to actually eat them.
So what about nuts?
Nuts. So for my archetypes, well, actually, let me step back. Because of the sort of Whole30 keto diet and paleo diet, I think we grossly overconsume nuts. And nuts actually work really well for men, but less so for women. And
good news for me.
yeah, yes. And like butters, like any type of almond butter or nut butter, if you're trying to lose weight and you're a woman, that's the disastrous thing for you to do, particularly if you're taking carbohydrates out of the diet. Because most women I know, once that teaspoon or tablespoon goes into the jar, half the jar's gone. The only exception is tahini. There's something about that sesame seed butter that people are like, it's pretty bitter. I'm having one. So in the archetype diet, I split it by the archetypes. So for the nurturer who is, she's got more of that stocky build. And so having nuts, which are energetically and chemically more dense, can weigh her down. And so I move her on to the seeds. She has more of the pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds. That's a better fit for her than the nuts. For the Wonder Woman and the Femme Fatale, having a small serving of nuts once a day is perfectly fine. And that small serving is probably about 12. But I want them to get more variety in rather than just the nuts that they're getting oils and the avocado in. And for the ethereal, though, the nuts are fantastic because they are so grounding. So, and because the ethereal is so light and airy, she needs the nuts to ground her. So she actually works quite well on a vegan diet because she has this greater tolerance for carbohydrates and greater tolerance for the fats. So when everybody's looking at that like sort of skinny girl that they want to be like, and they're eating these sort of macro bowls with a whole lot of fats in it, that works for her body type, but not for the other three.
How would you rank your nuts?
I put them all in the same category. And
so they're all peanuts too? Peanuts?
Except for peanuts, because peanuts put as like a legume. So all in the same category. What drives me crazy is that everybody's like almonds. I see on food sensitivity tests that people develop sensitivities to almonds. I think I even wrote an article on this for MindBodyGreen, like in 2012.
To me, there's a whole environmental thing with almonds too.
Completely.
Like it takes 20 gallons of water to produce like it's insane.
I use hemp seed milk for that purpose. So one of my favorite nuts is, however, is Brazil nuts, because the Brazil nuts are the richest source of selenium. And so for my Wonder Woman and my nurturers who are subject to really susceptible to thyroid disorders, I've got them snacking on those a few times a week. With some goji berries, it's a perfect snack. But in terms of like cashews and hazelnuts and walnuts, just get the variety, and it's the most important thing. And pistachios.
My favorite.
Yeah, they're fantastic.
So you mentioned fat, which leads me to fat, keto, intermittent fasting, that whole thing that's happening right now. What are your thoughts on? I'll put all three of those things in a bucket. They're sort of together, although they're different. But.
So let's start with intermittent fasting.
Yep.
Fine. I'm going to say good. Fine for people who are not stressed. Mm-hmm. And so their adrenals are functioning appropriately. I don't know many of those people. I'm going to be real. I just don't. It works better for men than it does for women.
Yep.
For women, I much prefer them to eat within a 12-hour period. And that's my very first rule, as you think about the time, rather than eating within that 8-hour period. The archetypes come into play here. The femme fatale, do not put her on the intermittent fasting because she will develop an eating disorder around it. She will start to feel incredibly guilty if she eats outside of that 8-hour period, and she gets into a binge-like mentality. I don't really love intermittent fasting because it's much harder to do than it is to eat within a 12-hour period. Know why you're doing it. Right. Like if you're doing it for weight loss, there are easier ways to do that. Eat within a 12-hour period and eat the same amount of food. I've done it because I try everything, and I tried it probably 6 years ago. I was probably on it for a good 6 months. I will tell you, it made no difference to my weight. What it did do is exacerbated my anxiety to the point that I almost had a panic attack.
Wow.
And because I wasn't eating until 2:00, and I like coffee. So I was drinking coffee, maybe 2 cups of coffee, and then eating. And I got worried about that. And I went to my acupuncturist, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I've never experienced this before. And he said to me, do you think it was blood sugar levels? And I'm like, blood sugar levels is the most basic thing that you can manage as a nutritionist.
Right.
And I went, oh my God. Holy hell, this was a blood sugar issue. Right? My blood sugar level was so low because I've been doing intermittent fasting for so long. Right? And just on this caffeine, that it tripped that anxiety. So it's like, know what you're doing it for.
Right.
I'm that Wonder Woman archetype, so my adrenals are a little I'm up. I'm excitatory. So something like that is more going to be beneficial for me.
What about fat and ketosis and the whole thing? Like I'm throwing the ghee in the coffee, the butter in the coffee. I'm doing keto. It's like, it's a thing and it works for, I'm just curious.
It works because you stick to it. It's so restrictive that it's going to give you those results. Again, the same type of thing. I think it works really well for men. I think it works less well for women because we don't tolerate that much fat in our diet. It's much harder for us, which are a little bit smaller, to be able to emulsify all the fats that are coming in.
So what do you think? Do you think it works? Is what you're saying, it works because it's so strict and people adhere to it? Or does it work because of what it's doing?
You could do that, or you could actually go on the Atkins diet. You put them side by side. I can tell you that they're going to give you the same results.
So are you a believer in this idea that we should all be eating tons of fat?
I'm a believer that we should be eating fat, but most women that come into my practice are very educated and they're overeating fat. So I keep fat to 2 servings at lunch and at dinner, plus any other fats that naturally would come in from wild salmon.
So it's not eating like gobs of grass-fed butter and ghee and coconut oil and all that stuff.
Definitely not. Unless there's a mitochondrial issue. And so you need that high level of fat to repair the cell membrane of the mitochondria. So if we think of like Dave Asprey, that's why he started it.
Right. Because
his mitochondria was so damaged. So again, it's like, well, know why you're doing it. Like, what's it for? Is it for a restoration process? Like if you have an autoimmune disease and you've been eating a whole lot of carbohydrates, then going on the ketogenic diet for a month or maybe 2 months could be the greatest thing for you, because it's also going to reset how you think about food. But then it's starting to incorporate more of the vegetables back in. So the problem with the ketogenic diet is it limits the carbohydrates, including the vegetables. And so we need the fiber in the vegetables to be able to restore the gut microflora.
So please tell me avocados are okay.
Of course. Avocados are fantastic. I get accused of going too heavy on the avocados.
So would you say, so Walter Longo was on here and he was like, he questioned avocados. He's like, well, there's never been, a culture in history that consumed as many avocados. So technically we don't know. And I was like, whoa. Don't say that to me. Stop. It's like, he told me there's Santa Claus. There's no Santa Claus. So going back to keto, do you think it's a fad or do you think it's a trend?
It's a trend.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with trends.
Well, what do you think is I'll segue it. What do you think is a trend and what do you think is a fad right now?
Trend and fads, I put into the same category. Trends,
well, like fad has no staying power. So fad is something I would classify as something that's really hot right now, but in 2 years from now may not be around. Where a trend is something that has momentum and has some staying power.
I'm going to say it's a trend because there are valid reasons for eating that way.
Sure.
I'm going to say it's
in extreme situations.
Fad for weight loss.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, like it's a trend. Like I know people who have had cancer or dealing with cancer, going to surgery, and they're prescribed keto. You got to go.
That's why it will still be around, because it can be used for therapeutic purposes.
Yes.
But if it's for weight loss, to me, it's a fad. So where I would like to see wellness going is we become much more balanced with our way of eating. Because there are so many ways that you can lose weight, which is why these things take off. Like, people still want to lose weight, but it's a harder way of doing it. I have people that come into me where they've been on the ketogenic diet, not seeing those results. Can't live that way. It's very difficult to follow a ketogenic diet when you're eating out. When you live in New York City and 4 to 5 of your meals you eat out, and so. What I want to see is it's just much more balance around how we look at food. You haven't asked me about fruit, which is another sort of controversial area, and this is one that really frustrates me, because fruit's not like this colored sugar cube, and we perceive it to be that way. So 2 pieces of fruit a day is fantastic.
But all fruit's not created equal.
It's not all created equal, but this is where I'm going to get better sort of jump up and down, is with the glycemic index. So the glycemic index was developed in the 1980s, and how they came up with it is they took 10 people and they measured the glycemic response to 50 grams of carbohydrate in that food, and then they averaged it. And so we don't know whether you and I are going to have different responses to a piece of fruit because just our setup is different. So the glycemic index is just a guide. Besides that, it doesn't really take into account the quantity of it. It doesn't consider the phytonutrients. So the glycemic index was developed in 1981. The phytonutrients we just started to discover in the mid-1990s. So when we hear about like all the carotenoids and the anthocyanins and bromelain, all discovered in the mid-1990s. People haven't put this together.
Right.
So when we look at food purely from a sugar perspective, it's the equivalent of judging a person based on their weight without considering anything else.
Well, would you say that like blackberries are better than bananas for most people?
Yes. So bananas I would put into more of that like starchy category. So bananas are one of the few ones where I'd say fantastic after a 90-minute run.
Right. But
the rest of the time it's too starchy. So that like the bananas and the potatoes and the pumpkin, all of that would sort of fit into that more of that starchy carbohydrate category. But a cup of pineapple versus a cup of blueberries, you know the difference in that is a quarter of a teaspoon of sugar.
So what are your favorite?
All of them. So
I love it.
So it's like don't just stay with the low glycemic fruits. Otherwise, you're going to miss out on some of the phytonutrients and some of those more supposedly high glycemic fruits.
So apple's okay?
Apple's fantastic. Unless you have SIBO. Right? Papaya, pineapple. Like with the archetypes, I'm working with the chakras as well. So you can use the color to rebalance your emotional state. So for like the Wonder Woman archetype, her third chakra is out of balance.
I didn't know you got the chakras in there as well.
I did.
You got everything in there.
I got a lot in there. So when I had a problem with the book of trying to work out what category to put it in. Is it self-help? Is it diet? Like what is
All
it?
the above. Put it in diet.
It's like if you've got a business meeting, like go and have a pineapple smoothie for breakfast, like rebalance that third chakra.
So even though I am not a female, I have had back issues, although I'm fine now, which, root chakra related. What fruit should I have?
Jason, you have a metabolism that burns through things super fast. So for you have the option of having whatever fruit you want. Now, if you still had back issues and you're dealing with some type of, scar tissue or something like that, maybe you might be loading up on a little bit of pineapple because the bromelain probably wouldn't be enough, but you'd probably take a supplement with something like that in it to eat away at the scar tissue.
Okay, so I have a green light on all fruit.
Yes, even a banana.
I love bananas. I'm in. I'm very excited about that. Well, I'm glad.
You and Colleen are lean. It's like you guys get to eat more food.
Well, I think it's been, people rank fruit and traditionally say, blackberries, raspberries, your berries first, but, put berries at the top, at the bottom. But I'm glad you like fruit. I think that's a good message to get out there.
Yes. And just on that note, because I'll continue on going on with it, having a piece of fruit is not going to stimulate candida. Right? All these anti-candida programs out there, you can't put the fruit in. That little piece of fruit that you eat converts to a very, very small amount of sugar that the cells are going to use to convert to energy way before it even gets to the large intestine. It's impossible. So I have on my anti-candida programs, everyone's still eating 2 pieces of fruit.
So we're going to move on. We only have 2 categories left to cover. I'm going to call these the fun categories for me. So coffee and then alcohol.
I think you know my thoughts on coffee.
You're okay with coffee?
Yeah. I really like coffee. Most people enjoy it. The only time I would take it out of somebody's diet is if they're adrenally fatigued. Mm-hmm. For that person, they feel like they can't even start the day with coffee, so maybe we'll just do a very small amount of coffee so they can make it through. But
and are you okay with I'll do ghee and coffee in the morning?
Sure. Yeah, if that's how you want to get a little bit of make it creamy.
Yep.
That's fine. So that's whether you want to use some organic milk or nut milk or ghee, that's fine. And you can look at the genetics. So if you're a slow metabolizer of caffeine, you know it because you just don't feel very good when you drink coffee. I'm a fast metabolizer of caffeine, so I feel good drinking coffee.
Well, I think it's one of those things too with coffee. Colleen, my wife, she'll have a cup, and then if she has anything in the afternoon, she can't sleep. I could have coffee at 10 o'clock at night, and I'm fine. I don't do that.
Probably a fast metabolizer of it. Same with me, but I don't drink it after 11. The point I would make on coffee, though, is make sure it's organic.
Yep.
It's a crop that is sprayed heavily with pesticides.
Yep.
And you notice the difference between a clean cup of coffee and then one that you're grabbing from the little street cart, which tastes really good.
Sure.
But 2 hours later you are tired, and that's just because of the pesticides in that coffee.
What about alcohol?
Well, yes. So.
Well, yes. There's the answer, everyone. Alcohol, yes.
And it depends on the alcohol too. So.
Well, if you could rank your alcohol, yes. Like if you had to rank your alcohol,
so tequila would be number one.
Yeah.
It is one of the cleanest alcohols. It's also the only alcohol that's an upper, so you're less likely to feel a little depressed the next day. Wine, yes.
If you had to rank your wines,
organic.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Red, white, sparkling.
And the same spectrum, like whatever your preference is. Champagne and sparkling has more yeast, so if you're sensitive to yeast, you can react more to champagne. Mm-hmm. If you are dealing with a little bit of a yeast overgrowth like Candida, then you are better off taking the wine and champagne out of the diet until you've resolved that. But wine tastes amazing. I do know that I've seemed to notice it with my clients is that once they get into their 40s, so they can start to react to wine in a way that they didn't, and they'll start to get night sweats and things like that. It's nicknamed the wine sweats. So if that's the case, which I'm suspicious is a little bit of a yeast reaction, then you should just be coming off the wine and going towards a tequila or a mezcal, certainly gluten-free vodka. And if you like dark spirits, then obviously with no soda.
What about beer?
If weight loss is part of the equation, beer has to come out.
Right.
And again, you have the yeast and the fermentation there. So if there's a reaction to that, then take that out.
So what do you think is interesting about wellness going on? Personalization, the microbiome, telomere. We could go on and on. DNA, all this testing, everything. What's exciting to you? What is a little unnerving?
Wellness is a $3 trillion industry right now, which I think is really fantastic and wonderful. What I'm enjoying seeing is science back up what we as practitioners have seen for decades, particularly with like the gut microbiome. Not just the gut microbiome, the microbiome everywhere.
Sure. The
downside, it's a really sort of trendy place to be, so there's a lot of noise. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and it's almost like if you have a blog, you become an expert on wellness. And something came up yesterday on Instagram. It was like rapeseed oil is the same as canola oil, and it was on a friend's Instagram.
Wait, what was the claim?
Rapeseed oil is the same as canola oil.
Rapeseed is the same?
No, rapeseed.
Rapeseed.
Rapeseed. And it's actually not, but they're derived from the same plant. The canola oil has just been modified, and they've removed some of the phytonutrients from it, and it's often genetically modified, not always, but rapeseed oil isn't. It's more pure. And so I'd written a response back to that, and then I thought, I better look to see if I'm actually accurate. And I think I was like on Wikipedia, and it wasn't like right. It was like It was incorrect, and so I was like, oh my goodness, there is so much misinformation out there. It's like we need to scrub the web of like what's going on with what's accurate and what's not accurate. So I that's where I'm concerned is. Because there's such an interest in it, the depth of knowledge that's out there with people is on the surface. And when you're dealing with chronic diseases, whether it's like an autoimmune disease or thyroid issues or cancer, it can be really challenging to be able to discern what's true and what's not, and even studies are misinterpreted.
Sure.
Like I told you about the sugar study.
Sure, I see that.
So it's hard.
I see that in a lot of marketing of supplements.
I'm going to share this on here. I cannot believe this, but I sell supplements. My credit card processing company last week said we're no longer going to be able to process anything because supplements are now considered high risk. I'm like, what? And they said, well, the supplements are now making these claims that are like medical claims. And I said, not the supplements I'm selling. Right. And then they said, nonetheless, our credit card processing company thinks it's too risky. And I was like, oh my goodness, is this a state that we're coming into? Because they're just getting way too many returns.
Sure. Well,
and so that's worrying.
Yeah, so I was going to say, like, what keeps you up at night and what has you excited in the morning?
Not much keeps me up at night, thank goodness. I value sleep way too much. That is the truth. And what gets me excited is I love seeing transformation. I love seeing success with people, particularly in the mind. When I see somebody's mind shift in terms of greater self-awareness and being able to change their behaviors and understand why they have been responding this way, whether it's in a relationship or with food, and it's this aha moment, brings tears to my eyes. Like, I'm like, oh, yay.
So is self-awareness the key to living a complete, fulfilling life at your ideal weight?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think self-awareness is key to a lot of things, actually. Yep. So if you could go back, last question, if you could go back in time and give your 20-something self advice, what advice would that be?
Well, like my archetype is the Wonder Woman, so valued herself on success and achievement. And with that, I felt like I needed to be highly educated and never felt like I knew enough. So I spent decades and decades, I'm now 43, studying and studying and studying. And there were times in my life where I had these great opportunities. Did a lot of TV. I moved into nutrition in my late 20s, and I had a lot of TV coming my way in my early 30s when I was just starting out. And I felt not smart enough. And whenever I went on TV, I was so anxious. I'd have a day of anxiety before I went on TV because I was so worried I was going to get something wrong. And it's only now that I can understand why that was the case. And I wish at that time I just had not worried about it and I completely embraced it. And it didn't matter to me whether I got something wrong. I think that for me, and that's a lot where the archetype was developed. It's like you no longer become vulnerable to that external factor so that you can progress in life. I would have embraced it a lot more.
Donna, thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
Everyone, check out the Archetype Diet. Pick it up. Thanks so much.
Thank you.